Pandora Syndrome. Written by April Walleen. Read by April Walleen. Directed and recorded by Andreas Gallego. Chapter 10. Pack Party. I stared in confusion as we pulled up to the nice suburban home. "You sure this is it?" I asked, staring out at the neatly manicured lawn before us. The cookie-cutter home wouldn't have been out of place in a Better Homes and Gardens magazine, complete with a decorative wood motif and cream accents. I snorted a little as I looked over at Mel in disbelief. "Seriously? This is your pack leader's house? I was expecting a cabin in the woods, not Beaver Cleaver's house. And you live in a dank, dark castle littered with gargoyles, right, Dracula? Don't be so stereotypical," Mel laughed. "We're perfectly capable of leading normal lives in the modern age." She had me there. I couldn't help but smile. Clearly she was feeling better, though she was still deathly pale, a stark contrast from her usual caramel-skinned goddess countenance. I stepped out of the car to help Mel, and I was suddenly swamped with a waft of gingery dog smell, much stronger than that of Mel alone. I felt sick with nerves, not because I was afraid, but because of the sheer volume of werewolves that had to be around to produce that strong of a scent. I was doomed. Mel had told me stories about her pack's strict rules. I could get kicked out, or worse, if I even looked at the pack leader wrong. I took a deep breath in an attempt to calm myself and froze. There was another scent lingering underneath the stench of wolf. A strong one. It was the sense of death. It made me momentarily dizzy, and I had to grip the edge of the car to keep myself steady. I only ever got this feeling in graveyards where there was a massive amount of dead around. Here, it had caught me off guard. "Whoa," I hissed, unable to stop myself. I nearly jumped when Jack came to my side. "What's wrong?" I had nearly forgotten they had left ahead of us. I turned to see Hank help Mel out of the car. Sarge nuzzled my knees with a little whine. God save me from empathetic family members. "What's the matter?" Jack asked. "There are a lot of dead people here," I replied. It was ominous, but it was all I could say. "Dead people?" Mel asked then as Hank helped her my way. Damned wolf hearing. She eyed the cul-de-sac full of pleasant suburban homes skeptically. "Is there a cemetery nearby?" Hank asked. "No, it's here. We're standing on it," I told them. A lot of dead people. I could feel the dormant bodies this neighborhood had been built upon. "The pack would have smelled something like that," Mel replied. The shadows under her eyes had grown dark, and I could tell she was exhausted. "The scent of death is pretty unmistakable." "They're really far down," I told her. "Like 50 feet. "Oddly specific," Jack mumbled. I rolled my eyes at him, though he was right. I was positive that was how far down they were, give or take a few inches. The dead were there in the coldest, darkest soil, a whole slew of corpses buried beneath our feet, squirming at the touch of my mind like worms in soil. They were practically itching to make contact, eager for my interaction. I took a breath, calmed, and did my best to push them to the back of my mind. "Well," Mel sighed, "if they aren't of the undead variety, then I say leave them be. I've had more than enough undead for one day." Mel, Hank, and Jack started toward the house. "Hold on a minute," I called, and the group turned. "If I recall our last conversation, Jack is going to cause a riot if he goes in there." Jack rolled his eyes at me, but Mel knew I was right. A vampire would be bad enough. Bringing in a dead man would drive the wolves into a frenzy. He looked back at Mel, waiting for her to contradict me. Mel just nodded. "Sorry, Jack. She's right." "You're not still on about that, are you? These are extenuating circumstances. Mel's hurt." "There are few things werewolves can tolerate less than the stench of rotting flesh." "I'm not rotting," Jack fumed. "It'll drive them mad," Mel continued apologetically. "And Hank still gets to go?" he retorted, and Hank stiffened up as if to say, "What the hell, bro?" I looked at Hank. If this came down to a fight, he wouldn't stand a chance. "Maybe Jack is right." "The hell he is," Hank retorted, and I looked to Mel. This was her party, after all. Mel seemed to deliberate a moment. "I hate to do this, but having a human present will keep the alpha calm. He's never been good with vampires." I could tell that part of her just liked having Hank at her side, but I wasn't about to bring that up. "So you're using Hank as a human shield?" Jack asked. Mel winced a little, but shrugged. "And you're okay with this?" he asked Hank. "Well, I've always wanted to see one of these events, and if I can help, then..." He trailed off, and Jack just glared at him. Fine. If things get violent, I'm coming in there, he threatened. Come on, Sarge. We're sitting this one out, he said, leading the shaggy husky away. Sorry, Jack, I called after him, but he just waved a hand without turning around. I couldn't blame him. I wouldn't like being left out either. I sensed that he was annoyed, but underneath that, he was worried. Honestly, I wasn't feeling too good about this myself, but it had to be done. Mel was hurt, and I was going to have to do some explaining to El Numero Uno Wolf. I looked to Hank and Mel. She nodded, and I moved to her side, taking her other arm so we could help her up the lawn to the house. I felt her weight shift heavily onto me and realized that she'd been trying to keep most of it off of Hank. He was human and weaker than this, but he was a broad-shouldered male. I was sure he was sturdy enough to handle her. However, I knew Mel was worried, so I happily took the brunt of the weight. Here we go, I muttered unenthusiastically. Hank gave me a reassuring look. Unfortunately, I did not feel reassured. Mel knocked on the large oak door of the immaculate house. A moment later, it opened to reveal a fierce-looking female. She was shorter than Mel, but not by much. The woman had broad shoulders and the customary short-chopped dark hair and golden eyes of Mel's pack. Though if it was just Mel's pack, or werewolves in general that had these features, I couldn't be sure. My experiences were limited to one bar brawl and my time with Mel. "Melissa, you made it," she greeted before taking in the whole scene. She froze, assessing Mel. However, instead of seeming worried, the woman huffed in irritation. "Tonight?" she asked angrily. "You really had to pull something like this tonight?" I stared at the woman wide-eyed. Mel was clearly in pain and had nearly died, but that didn't even seem to faze the woman. In fact, she seemed more annoyed than anything. Then again, wolves did fight a lot, so maybe this was a common occurrence. What did I know? The fact that she didn't seem to care about helping Mel or giving her medical attention made my blood boil. "Just let us in, Lana," Mel sighed. "We need to see the alpha." "Not if you're going to bleed all over my carpet. I just had it steamed." "It's mostly dried," Mel sighed. "Now let us in. If not, I can just pass out on the front doorstep, though it'd be a shame if your guests had to step over my unconscious body." I was slightly surprised by the venom in Mel's voice, but I couldn't say the woman didn't deserve it. Lana huffed in irritation and then reluctantly stepped aside, opening the door so we could bring Mel in. The woman eyed Hank and I, momentarily sizing us up. Her gaze stopped on me then, and she immediately turned on Mel. "What kind of trouble are you bringing into my house?" "Lana," Mel sighed, "this is what happens when you marry the pack leader. Your house is where the pack deals with their problems. I'm clearly having a problem. If you don't like it, you only have yourself to blame. Now get out of the way." Lana glared at her and then shut the door behind us. "You can wait in the office," she said with a snarl, an actual reverberating snarl. "You could go get someone to look at her wounds," I popped in then, annoyed by this whole encounter. The woman just snickered at me, turned, and then took off in the opposite direction. "She seems pleasant," I told Mel quietly. "She's a bitch," Mel replied, and nodded for us to help her forward. No joke. Seriously, though, you need to be looked at. "I'm fine," I glared at her. "Have you seen how pale you are?" "We talk to the alpha first, then I'll seek treatment. I promise." Reluctantly, Hank and I nodded. Then, taking her directions, we led her farther into the house. As we passed through the threshold, I was hit by a sudden onslaught of gingery dog smell. I hoped I would get used to it soon. Hank and I helped Mel through the small, empty hallway. We passed by an archway that led into the living room. Both people and werewolves filled the space. I could sense the humans in the house, that metallic blood scent mixed like oil and water with the ginger dog. I was pleasantly surprised to note that there were just as many wolves as humans. They all drank and ate together while happily conversing, but you could definitely tell the humans from the wolves. The wolves were just larger, like a whole head's height above any of the humans. Not to mention, they were hairier and more densely muscled than your average person. The home was nicely decorated with expensive wood furniture, pastel paintings, and delicate baubles. It was like Susie Homemaker rustic. On the wall hung a massive "Congratulations" banner, and I realized that this wasn't just a get-together. "What's the occasion anyway?" I asked Mel quietly. "We're celebrating our triumph over the Redlands pack. They'd been threatening our borders. It's no big deal." I felt on edge then. This wasn't just a party. It was a ceremony. I groaned inwardly. This day just kept getting worse. We continued down the hallway and into a large office. The room was wall-to-wall wood, with a large oak desk and several mounted animal heads. Large animals, like bears and mountain lions. I had no doubt that the pack had taken these creatures down. Or maybe just the pack leader himself. "You sure he's going to be all right in here?" I asked Mel, nodding to Hank as we shut the door behind us. Hank smiled. "Aw, are you worried about me, Dee?" "The state of your health, yes," I replied as we set Mel down in a large leather-bound chair across from the desk. "Werewolves generally protect humans and we don't eat them," Mel replied, eyeing me. Yes, my main food source was human blood. I could have brought up the fact that werewolves who went feral ate humans, but I decided to take the high road. So, as I usually did, I made light of the situation. "I can't help my diet," I told her. "If I could live on red vines alone, I would." A smile came to Mel's face at that. "I bet you would," she snickered. I was glad that she seemed to be feeling better. Or if she wasn't, at least she seemed in better spirits. She still looked like hell, though. In hindsight, we could have wiped some of the blood and gore off of us before entering the house. Then again, maybe Mel had wanted to piss off Lana. Mel's face went serious then, and she looked to Hank. "I'm glad you're here, but Dee is right. This might be a tense conversation. Just try to keep your head down." "What do you mean?" he asked, all innocence. "She means don't crack any dumb jokes in front of the boss." Hank rolled his eyes, but nodded and took a seat across the room. I took the other leather chair next to Mel. Mentally, I tried to pump myself up. However, despite my efforts, I still wasn't prepared when I heard heavy footsteps approach the office door. I tensed as the door opened, revealing a very large man. Very large. Like wrestler large. He had short black hair, shoulders that could challenge the breadth of a ship's mast, and the telltale golden werewolf eyes that were slightly luminescent in the dim light of the office. The supernatural sting of ginger with that dog smell hung on him like a cloud. Just by looking at him, I knew he was the pack leader. He was larger than the rest of them, broader built. I tried not to blanch. His golden gaze was fierce and hard. He was an alpha, clearly used to being obeyed without a question. "Dirk," Mel greeted the big guy. "Melissa," he nodded, pausing to take in her appearance. "I take it your dealings with the vampire coven have come to a head?" "Not as well as I would have liked," she said, taking a seat on the other side of the large desk. "Pandora is here to help explain the current state of affairs." I stiffened at her propriety with the man. "Call me Dee," I offered, but Mel just glared at me, so I sat back quietly. I guess the pack leader would call me Pandora. Whatever. "So this is the vampire contact that's been helping with your issue?" Dirk asked, and Mel nodded. I sat stunned. Vampire contact? Well, that sounded awfully official. "Hi," I smiled weakly. "I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't be here," I told him, and I could feel one of my nervous rambles coming on. Luckily, he spoke again before I could continue. "I assume it is necessary considering the subject matter in Mel's current state," Dirk told Mel pointedly. "She has information pertinent to our pack and a possible new danger." "And what about the human?" he asked. We looked back at Hank, who seemed stunned to be suddenly included in the conversation. All of a sudden, he approached the desk and was holding his hand out to Dirk. I could feel Mel tense beside me. Apparently, this wasn't proper protocol. "Henry Walker," he introduced himself, and I felt a little dumb. I never knew Hank was short for Henry. Dirk's nostrils flared a bit, but accepted the hand after a moment. "He's a friend of ours," Mel explained. "Hank, Henry, arrived after the incident." "I take that to mean that he was not involved in the altercation?" "No, sir," Hank replied. I couldn't be sure, but I think Mel had gone just a little bit paler. "Then, if you don't mind, I would like to speak to the two that were present," he said, nodding back to Hank's chair. Luckily, Hank was quick to take a hint. He nodded and swiftly darted back to the chair, where he sat silently. Dirk looked between the two of us. "Tell me your information and this new danger." Mel and I exchanged a glance, and she began to recount the happenings of the day. She was perhaps emphasizing a little too much on what a big help I'd been, but I decided to let her take the lead. It was her pack, after all. It was my turn next, and I did my best to explain everything about the note, what I knew of the necromancer, minus some select details from my past with the man and about the undead, plus what had happened to Mel since she'd been mostly unconscious for that part. When we were done, Dirk took a moment to think. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and even. So, Pandora here helped take down the vampire coven and saved one of our pack members, but now we have a rogue necromancer in our midst. I had to admit, that last part didn't sound too good. That's about the shape of it, I confirmed. And you believe this necromancer is here because of you? He asked me then. I nodded nervously. Dirk glared. Mel leaned forward. Regardless of how this necromancer got here, they are in our territory and we need to hunt them down, she pointed out quickly. Why? Dirk asked plainly, and we both stared at him. What do you mean, why? Mel asked, frustration evident on her face. I agree that this necromancer poses a threat, he said with a nod. Yet it seems that their only intention is to get to this vampire who is not a member of our pack. She is a friend of the pack, Mel shouted at him. I hadn't seen Mel this angry in a while, and I didn't like the turn this conversation was taking. She is a friend of yours, he snapped back, shutting Mel up. Yep, this definitely wasn't going well. I will not spend pack resources to hunt down a necromancer that has no ill will against my pack. Mel opened her mouth to protest, but Dirk silenced her with a look. Even I could feel the dominance radiating from this man. Pandora, he said, looking at me then. I fought the urge to gulp. I appreciate your assistance in dealing with the coven. As a token of our thanks, our pack will keep an eye out for this necromancer of yours. If we happen to hear or see anything, we shall let you or your maker know of our findings. My eyes widened a little in surprise. I certainly hadn't expected this. Thank you, was all I could manage to say. I probably could have used a little more help with this threat, but he was right. This was my battle. A heads up was about as good as I could expect. Dirk turned back to Mel then. This is all I have to say on the matter. Mel reluctantly nodded. Now, you need to go to the infirmary, and this vampire needs to leave the grounds. Leave? She's not leaving, Mel added quickly. And why not? I wondered that myself. He clearly didn't want me there. Mel glared at him. She is a friend of the pack, she reaffirmed proudly, even though he had already made his stance clear on that matter. I tried not to smirk at her bravado. Dirk sighed. She is a vampire, Melissa. Do you know how many humans we have here? They are our guests as well. Bringing a vampire into the mix endangers them. Pandora is not a danger, Mel defended. I glared at her for continuing to use my given name, but she ignored me. She has respect for humans, just like her maker, Romulus. I sighed heavily. She'd pulled out the Remy card. She'd done it on purpose. He was pretty well known in the supernatural community, so I imagined Dirk knew who he was, though I didn't see what difference that would make. Dirk seemed pretty firm on his no vampires allowed rule. I am aware of who she is and who she belongs to. She is how the pack found out about Robert. Mel's eyes grew wide as she looked at me. I stared back in confusion. Who? I asked. It was a long time ago when I was young and my father was the pack leader, he explained. It is a black spot in our pack's history. Perhaps you will recall, a member of our pack had gone feral and was attacking humans. A sinking feeling began to form in my gut then. My father had no clue of the happenings, and some other pack members, out of a sense of loyalty, had been covering for their ailing brother. They hoped to revert his feral state. Unfortunately, once a feral gets a taste for human blood, they are hard to turn back. The hunters caught up to him, and Robert tried to run, but someone intervened. He said, looking at me pointedly. Visions of that night in the bar with Remy cycled through my mind. I remembered the altercation between the werewolves and the hunter. Then the strange wispy spirits that had surrounded the man came into my mind's eye. They had been so angry, so bent on revenge. I'd only been trying to help. I remember now, I nodded. I was there that night. I saw the blackness of your eyes when you stopped Robert in mid-flight. You'd halted a 250-pound werewolf with the merest touch of your hand. The fear on Robert's face was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I looked up at him sheepishly. How was I supposed to explain that it had been the spirits of the people Robert had killed, not me? Okay, well, I helped, but still. I looked over at Mel, who just stared at me with furrowed brows. "What happened to him?" I asked, because what else was I supposed to say? What he said was true. The order locked him away in silver chains, and he hasn't been seen since. I flinched a little at that. "I'm sorry for your loss." "I do not need your apology. Robert got what was coming to him. He'd been beyond the pack's help for some time, but no one wanted to admit it. I only bring this up because aside from your being a vampire, a potential danger to our human guests, you possess power that could be a danger to my pack. I promise you I would never knowingly endanger any member of your pack." He sighed heavily as he looked down at me with his dark golden eyes. I felt like a bug being pinned under a magnifying glass. "Honorable intentions you may have, but trouble follows you." I wanted to protest that, but he wasn't wrong. I do not want trouble in my house. "Dirk, it's just for one night," Mel finally stepped in. Dirk shifted his gaze away from me then, and I let go a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Let her stay long enough to see the event, and then we will go." Dirk stared at her evenly. I couldn't for the life of me tell what he was thinking. "Melissa," Dirk continued civilly, "if you take responsibility for her, then she may stay and enjoy the festivities. However, in the future, you will have more care for our human guests. Pandora may not intend to harm them, but her presence will put them ill at ease." He stood then. "Mel, thank you for the briefing. Now go to the infirmary so you do not collapse in the middle of the announcements. If you'll excuse me, I have other matters to see to." Within seconds, he was out the door, leaving Mel and I in the quiet of the dim office. "Well, all things considered, I think that went well," Hank said, breaking the silence. Mel gave me a sideways glance. "We should be hunting this necromancer down. I'm sorry I couldn't get the pack to help." "I am too," I replied. "He has a point, though." Mel glared at me. "This necromancer is after me. I do appreciate your help, but this falls on me, and it's not fair to drag your pack into it." "That necromancer has violated our territory," she replied angrily. "Because of me," I emphasized, but it was clear by the look on her face. We were not going to agree on this issue. "Look," I said calmly, "let's go get you fixed up. We've done enough worrying over this for one day." Mel clearly didn't want to let the issue go, but she eventually nodded. "Look at you being the voice of reason," she smirked at me. "Well, you didn't seem up to it, so I had to pick up the slack," I smiled. Then Hank and I followed Mel's directions to wherever the hell the infirmary was.